How's boarding going? Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks for being here. This is our Fancy Footwork webinar. So all about kind of our foundational footwork and kennel routines and door routines and all of that. Looks like we've got just a handful of folks on, well, more than a handful. And then that's the beauty of other people being able to get the recording tomorrow. But for those of you who are here, just a handful of announcements, and then I'll turn it over to Amy. My name is Lauren Revere. I'm the Director of Research and Programs here at Dogs Playing for Life. We are in webinar mode, so we can't see you, we can't hear you. Don't worry about accidentally turning on your mic or your camera. It can't happen. You've got the chat function available to you, so you can interact with each other if you want to. If you are doing that, make sure it's that everyone option that you're selecting. Otherwise, it'll just be me seeing what you're saying, which is fine if that's what you want. If you've got questions, please enter those in the Q&A field, and I'll either type out an answer for you right there, or I'll save it for Amy to answer at the end. And then you will get the recording and the slides tomorrow at about this time. That'll come from Zoom. And we have so many webinars coming up that I don't have time to tell you about all of them, but we have our free playgroup webinar tomorrow. That's our big, long 3.5 hour, we call it the why, the what, and the how of playgroups. So that's at 11 Eastern tomorrow. I'll put sign up details in the chat in just a few. Next week on Tuesday, we have our Unleash Reactivity webinar. So that directly builds on today's content. That's a great one for, working with dogs in shelters. And then we have another free webinar, our Impact of Playgroups webinar, coming up on June 18th. That's a shorter one. It's nice for administrators and folks who are trying to decide if playgroups are worth it. And then we've got a handful of other training handling webinars coming up in July. Our Stranger Danger, our For Dog's Sake, Can You Stop That? And also our webinar on handling fractious dogs, which is pretty new. This will only be the second time that we're doing it as a webinar, and that's on July 15th. So again, I'll put info for all of that in the chat. Before I turn it over to Amy, I have just a really quick poll for those of you who are on, and it's just asking whether you have seen this webinar before, and then also whether you're new to Dogs Playing for Life in general. So I'm gonna go ahead and launch that, answer if you like, and I think that's all from me.
So Lauren, do we only have, or is it just 2 people that are with us physically today? Because then everybody else just gets their recording.
We've got 26 on right now.
Oh, why do I only see,
2 is you and me.
No, I'm looking at the attendees for some reason and I'm not seeing.
It's probably showing you.
That's
So
okay.
for me, yeah.
That's all right. That doesn't matter. I was just curious if, because I was going to say, man, if we only have 2 of us with us, we can just yak through the thing and they can ask questions and do all that.
Yeah.
We're a little tight on time for this one because I've added some video. Always try to give you guys some new video. Let's see now. So how many have you seen a webinar before? Have you seen Fancy Footwork? So most have not seen Fancy Footwork. Okay. That helps me to know which slides I can kind of breeze through a little bit more quickly if you've had some level of exposure. And we were like a nice split between yes or no for anything else. All right, well, that's exciting. Welcome to all of you that are like brand spanking new to us. These are kind of designed to build upon one another. So some of the slides, if you have seen the playgroup, that's tomorrow though, right? But if you've seen playgroup before, some of this content is in the playgroup one, and then some of the content that's in this one will be in the Unleash Reactive one. And so they all build upon another, but we want you to have a unique experience so that you can come back and watch it again and know that you're going to have some new stuff. But okay, I'm going to end this poll. I think we've gotten the answers from everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
And do I need to share the results or no? No, we're not doing that yet. Okay.
Probably not that interesting.
All right, let's see if I can I'm trying to move this thing. Did it move? Are we on slide number 2? Okay,
yeah, you're good.
I'm trying a different view for me. And I'm old, so I'm not good with this technological stuff. This is why Lauren is always here to hold my hand through these. Okay, so I think most of you have some kind of exposure to us before, but this is like, you're going to get this slide in your handout. This is just kind of telling you about basically my history and where we got to all this kind of stuff. So I'm not going to belabor that. But this is very important to us and everything that we're teaching with regard to, I always say that I don't like to focus on methodology, even though today I'm going to be teaching you like our preferred techniques and systems. for getting dogs to walk politely and behave politely through regular routines and shelters. That is important to me. But generally speaking, even these systems that we kind of lock into and that we're sharing with you, the ones that have worked for us, I always believe that we have to understand the core principles of learning more than focusing on a methodology, because you guys all know, you think you've got it down and then you work with a dog that's like, none of that is going to work for me. And so how you can proceed with any living being and trying to help to teach them, even if they lock up on you, is that you really understand your principles behind learning, and so that you can be creative and adjust your approach accordingly. So we are big on that, okay? Because there's no one way to train that's going to work for all dogs or all handlers or all families or all shelters, for example. And, we're all very curious about, how did the dog end up in this state, especially if they're behaving badly and we're trying to correct that, right? If they're like extremely bad on leash and we're trying to work through some of those problems. So the nature versus nurture thing, we all know that there's components of both that actually are contributing to the behavior that we're dealing with in front of us now. And sometimes we're going to have the benefit of knowing the dog's history and maybe some kind of a story that would give us some kind of explanation for them. But oftentimes we're flying blind. And so we've got to be ready to proceed no matter what. And we really do embrace all four quadrants of learning theory. So our approach is broad. And so we don't fall into, while we love all of the positive reinforcement stuff, we don't stop there. We are not positive reinforcement only based. So we do believe in all four of those quadrants and how they affect behavior. And so we're going to be talking about all of them in this presentation. Because we do like taking a more comprehensive approach so that less dogs will fall through the cracks if they got a little bit of a unique thing going on for them. And, this is kind of my little rant, but our personal opinions or our preferences, really, we've got to put that stuff aside when we're trying to help shelter dogs, and really whatever's working, right? So if we're doing something and it's working and your programming is trending in the right direction, then keep doing what you're doing. But if you're not getting the results, if the dogs are maybe deteriorating in your care, and I know we're all facing pretty tough outcomes, especially for large dogs these days, if you don't have good progress and measured results with your programming, then open your minds to consider other possibilities. And I'm assuming that's partially why you're all here, because you want to learn other stuff. So I'm going to show you this quick video. Let you listen
So,
for a
welcome.
second.
This is DPFL's first annual Team Skill Building Week, and we've been invited to spend the time here at the Long Mountain Humane Society, one of my home shelters.
All right, I just wanted you guys to hear all the clicking and stuff that was going on. And what I want you to be looking at that, this is what we're trying to get to, right? Dogs behaving politely on leash, even in a shelter environment. And to share what this is about, I already told you it was our skill building week. So some of the folks here are the staff of Long Mountain Humane Society. Some are a couple of their volunteers. And then we've got trainers that were from all around the country that were working for DPFL at that time too. So at least half the dogs in this room are being handled by somebody that they've never met before. And also, this was a time they had some bad outbreak and the dogs weren't getting play groups, right? So normally we like to brag about, see how easy it is to get shelter dogs to behave this well, because they've gone to play groups, they've been well socialized with one another, and they're getting their yayas out, which makes all this stuff so much easier. So these guys didn't even have the benefit of getting those yayas out in play groups. A couple of these dogs are brand new to this kind of environment. And what you're going to see is that a similarity in the handling. And we do know that this is true. Consistency is key with training. So these guys are all DPFL trained, so they handle the same. You're not seeing active leash corrections, but you are seeing all different tools on these dogs. And you are hearing a lot of clicking and treating, and you might see some application of pressure and release in here, but this is the result that we get. This is the point of the fancy footwork training, is so that you all feel like you can get your shelter dogs looking like this. Okay, so this is my best way to exit out of that one. There we go, sorry. All right, so handling or training, there's a big distinction, critical distinction between these things too. I think some of us are just, some people are better handlers than others. It's the same thing as like maybe everybody that has a driver's license can now has a license to operate a car, but it doesn't mean everybody is the same level of a driver, right? Some people are just better drivers than others. So when you're a really, really strong handler, that is awesome. If you're a really strong natural handler, that means that you can probably make dogs look pretty darn good, even if they don't actually understand their training. Whereas if you also learn the kind of clinical aspects of training and you become very good at that, then you can teach the dogs to work independently. They can learn behaviors on command that they can do for anybody, and they can do even if their environment changes, right? So that generalization of skills really comes from clinical training more than relying upon your relationship or your handling prowess, right? And ideally for everybody that we're working with at DPFL, we want to be as strong as we can in both, right? But we also accept that sometimes people are just much better natural handlers than others, okay? And so this statement of, well, the dog is doing well for me. This is something that our teams, if let's say somebody's saying, hey, I'm struggling with this dog, they've been really jumpy mouthy with me, or they're door darting when I'm working the kennel routine, anybody on our team, we would never say, well, the dog does well for me, because that's like a taboo statement in shelter work in shelter training, because our job is to make the dogs do well for others, unless we're going to take them home personally. So it's really important that we don't latch on to that, well, the dog is performing well for me. Let me share an example with you. This is at the Southampton Animal Shelter. This is a teen volunteer. She was one of our most advanced volunteers, so she did work with the behavior department. And this dog had been transitioned to only being worked by the behavior department because he was wary of strangers and was really nervous with people he didn't know coming in his kennel. So the regular volunteers couldn't rotate in and out with him. And he was, barking at them and air snapping and wanted them out of the kennel. So she's now going to work with him. This is the first time that she's going to be handling him since he was excluded for the training and behavior department. So now we're going to see all this work have we done, has it generalized, because she is a novel handler, even though she knows our handling. So she's handling him well and asking for things in a way that is familiar to him. She's not familiar to him. So they do a great job together. Where's my...
With him, that's why I feel comfortable with us.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Yep.
Courtney and Rebecca, I got it. This is King, and Courtney has handled him outside and put him away. He did show some wariness of strangers, and Courtney is a dedicated volunteer. She's been doing really well. She's helping out with some of the behavior dogs. Hello, handsome boy. Hello, handsome boy. Hello.
Now he knows the routine, so.
Hi, handsome boy.
All right, I'm going to mute it because we've all had plenty of listening to barking dogs in our life. So the couple of things that I want you to notice, she's working the kennel routine, and we're going to get into that in detail. He's also watching me, and I'm a virtual stranger to him. And he's kind of wondering what's going on with the camera, but he's done a really nice job. He's working nicely for her. Obviously, he didn't show any defensive behavior in his kennel with her. And I also want you to notice in these kennels, these are front to backs, but we have put up this PVC board, so they have visual barriers on the back side of their kennels, so that when the public would walk around the front, they could see the dogs, but when we would exit out of the back, it is less stimulating for them. So you guys consider, I'll let you hear what it's like when he's walking by.
So these two young ladies come for a full day together and work a lot of the dogs, behavior department.
So if you notice, you didn't hear the huge eruption that we typically hear when you have the dogs going past other dogs getting out of the kennel. So that's the benefit of those visual barriers. Now she's going to do her door routine with him. So that's the benefit of not only teaching people to handle well, she's handling beautifully the way that we prescribe. In addition to that, she's also knows how to work the dog in the clinical routine. He was clinically trained to perform that routine for whomever and wherever. And they both did a great job. So in the past, just to touch on this whole concept of positive reinforcement only versus being more open, right? In the past, the reason that all the positive only stuff has become so popular and so important for our fields is because in the old school, and there's still a lot of training programs that use a lot of compulsion, where you are teaching with correction, and you get, as is depicted here with these police dogs, extremely, extremely excellent, good impulse control and excellent training performance and criteria. But there's some downsides. And a lot of dogs would wash out of programs like this. And that's the most important thing is it's like not every human being can become a Navy SEAL, right? It's like the human beings that sign up to be put under that much significant pressure because they want to achieve something like that. When we're applying that kind of principle to our animals, they don't really get to make a choice about that, right? And so dogs will wash out of programs like this if they're not strong enough and stout enough to withstand that, right? So you can have dogs that just they're not happy about training. They might actually even become defensive even from their own handler, you can see avoidance behaviors and just the relationship in general can be damaged as a result of being too heavy and too compulsion oriented in your training. Then we went to the trend of focusing on positive only. And again, we love all this stuff, but we don't subscribe to positive only, which means you're never allowed to say no, and you shouldn't be applying any corrections, and all the pressure and release work that we prescribe is kind of off the table if you're a purist with positive only. The great thing about this is that this is really great for dogs that are lacking confidence and fearful, because it can help them come out of their shell and build their confidence, because there aren't things that are consequential for them in any kind of way that would make them more concerned or fearful. But the downside is typically, unless you have to be an extreme expert in doing this, and I'm talking about an expert at a high competition level, to be able to get excellent stimulus control as well as impulse control when you're training this way. You do have to have some control of the environment and their access to resources for this to work really effectively. And it's pretty unrealistic for most families to actually try to work with their dogs only focusing on positive reinforcement training. So this is kind of why we lean towards a more balanced approach. And Sarah Wilson, she said it. She goes, once you utilize a leash and you're affecting the dog's behavior at all, technically you can't call yourself a positive only trainer, no matter what equipment you have them on. So that's actually the truth. So when we talk about learning theory, for me, that means knowing the science and all four quadrants and how they are supposed to be impacting behavior, and then how you should be working with them to impact behavior. So classical conditioning, most of you have, learned something about this in school. This is the Pavlov's dog thing, and this is just the dog's behavior is completely insignificant. Not only the dog, the student, right? Your subject that you're trying to teach. It doesn't matter what they're doing at the moment. It's just that you have a stimulus that predicts something else. So for example, commonly in Pavlov's dog, he would ring the bell before he would feed the food. And after enough repetitions, when the dogs hear the bell, they would start salivating. There's actually a physiological response to a bell ringing before food was even presented, because they had made the association, right? And it doesn't matter if they were standing, sitting, scratching, doesn't matter, that the bell would predict that food was coming. So another normal thing that we deal with is if you pick up your leash or your keys when you're at home, your dogs all start dancing and get all happy because they make that association with being walked, right? So that is called classical conditioning. And I'm going to give you some kind of cool examples of a deaf and blind dog that we worked at our canine center. And we used a scent rag. So I was the first person that handled him. So I put my perfume on a scent rag. And this is how we would introduce him to people. He had landed a couple of minor bites, but they were defensive, distance seeking bites, because he was afraid when people he didn't know they were approaching him, he didn't know what to do with that. So we taught him these routines. And this means that we classically conditioned that scent equals you're going to meet a friend, somebody who is kind to you. The scent equals a kind, friendly person that you don't have to be afraid of.
Just asked for his sit, and now she's going to reinforce him holding his sit, and then she'll put herself in proper position. And then now you can approach. And so the stranger approaches, but from a distance, so that Allie can toss them his scent rag.
And then now you can come over and like literally touch his nose with it and just pull him
and lure him to you with it. And Allie will reinforce. You'll see how happy he is, right? Good, so that's good. And we're just reinforcing, not jumping. That's good, but he's happy to meet people. And you can literally just take the leash then. He's just now your dog. Good boy. Nice. There, nice.
I'm going to show you one more. Then we also created an association. We used a different scent with him, and this scent meant that he was going to be left alone. This allowed us to give him different environments that he could explore, but he didn't have to be searching for a person. It was an indicator to him that we're going to leave you and you're on your own, so you can bump along in this space and figure it out and just relax. So this was a different scent that we classically conditioned to mean, not only the scent, but we ran our hand down the side and went pat, pat on his side twice, then did the scent. Those things mean we're leaving. You don't have to search or follow us.
For you. There you go, good boy. Bye.
Okay, so that's classical conditioning. Now let's talk about operant conditioning. And I'm going to put this one up here too. If you can see, in this situation, the dog's behavior and what they're doing in the moment is extremely significant, right? So this means when you do this, then this is going to happen, right? So these are the 4 quadrants of learning theory, and they're color coded because there's a relationship, and we have the cross in the middle that says that the gray ones are related to one another and the yellow ones are related to one another. The most important thing to understand about learning theory is that the language is scientific and not the way we normally consider it. So positive and negative does not mean good or bad. It just means we're either applying something or adding something or withdrawing something. And then reinforcement and punishment does not mean good or bad. It just means reinforcement is going to mean that the behavior is more likely to happen again and more. We're going to get more of that behavior. And if a behavior is punished, that means that we should have less of a likelihood of that behavior happening again. So reinforcement to get more of something, punishment to get less of something. And then we're either applying something or we're withdrawing something. So positive reinforcement is the easiest for everyone. I'll show you the quickie, fun example. Where's my cursor? There we go. Where is my cursor? There we go.
Okay, it's January 9th, and Arlo is one of our rock stars.
Yes.
And Kev is working him. We just switched to working him for the ball for place because I was telling him because his ball drive is so strong that Kevin could probably get crazy distance on the place with this.
So you can see Kevin is giving him 0 information. He is only going to mark and reward when he's got 4 feet on that place board, right? So he'll mark and then toss the ball for him. And we're just allowing Arlo to work it out, which is adorable. I love how he backs up into it. Yes. So that's the use of positive reinforcement to increase his likelihood of getting on that place board. Okay. I'm going to let you see one more because he's just adorable. Yes, there we go. Oop. All right, now that is in relationship to negative punishment. The point of if we're going to withdraw something, right, something kind of has to be applied in the first place, ideally. So negative punishment in this situation, we have a dog that's barking and we want the dog to perform all these behaviors, but without the barking. So we were trying to isolate the barking and get less of that behavior. So we're going to negatively punish. We're going to take something away to say, I don't want you barking. This strategy is only going to work in the situation if this dog authentically wants the person to come in their kennel. If a dog is barking at you because they're afraid of you and they're telling you, go away, you're freaking me out, this would not be the right strategy for this dog. But in this case, you'll see how it's very effective in teaching him, I like everything you're doing, but I want you to do it without the barking.
All right, this is Thanos' kennel routine. I was going to negatively punish him for barking by marking him and walking away. She's going to reapproach when he's quiet. And her presence should be the cue to send him to place. Nice, beautiful. And she's gonna wait for him to be quiet, just like that. That was great.
So that's a great combination of the relationship between positive reinforcement. I'm gonna show up to take you out, but if you yell at me, I'm gonna go away. I'm gonna take myself away because you want me to come in and to get you out. So if you bark at me, that's gonna send me away. And if you're quiet, that's gonna bring me back in. So that's the relationship, positive reinforcement to negative punishment. So that's talking about positive punishment. This is the one that gets everybody all upset, right? So we're going to add something because we want you to do something less. This does not mean that it has to be harsh, frightening, nothing like that. It just has to be aversive enough that the dog is like, I don't want to experience that again. So that can be whatever they think. So here we go. Dog is climbing the fence. We're going to shake a can at them to say we would like less of that behavior so that they're less likely to climb the fence again.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
I told her how to work it.
So you
Okay, so So we also could have, if we're thinking about positively reinforcing, let's say we want to just reinforce them for not climbing in the first place, we could 100% add that strategy, right? If you're pacing at the bottom and you're looking up and you don't start to climb, I could be marking rewarding that, of course, to strengthen not climbing. But if we get to the point where the dog is probably very well rehearsed in climbing fences, maybe why he was at the shelter in the first place, pretty important for him to teach us that's not a good strategy for you in life. So let's make that a nuisance for you. So you decide, never mind, I don't want to do more of that. So now this is the one that typically is the negative quadrants are the hardest for people to understand. So for me, negative reinforcement is really all the pressure and release work that we talk about. So if I want a dog to sit on cue, right, I ask them, or an environmental cue of showing up at the door, and they don't sit when I ask them to, I can use gentle leash pressure to say, hey, you need to make some adjustment. And when your butt hits the ground, I'm going to take that pressure off, okay? So that they are more likely to sit when I ask them to in the future.
Beautiful.
You see, that dog is not food motivated, right?
It's a great example that the food was not the most motivating thing for her there, right? So it was just proceeding was the best reward for her.
So first of all, a couple things about that. What I loved is that I'm going to play it again and just talk about it while it's muted. So right here, Chris is taking his time. He knew that she wasn't food motivated, and she was a little defensive with handling, right? So he didn't want to get too handsy with her. He gave her a chance just to offer a sit because she showed up at the door. Then he asked her for the sit, and now he's going pressure on. You need to make an adjustment. Your butt on the ground is what I wanted, so pressure off. Negatively taking away the pressure is reinforcing your butt on the ground, okay? And now he tries to positively reinforce her for holding that sit, but she's like, that's not of value to me, right? But the point of that video is look at how gentle he was. But technically, when he touched her with that leash pressure, that is positive punishment at that moment. I don't want you to just stand there and ignore my cue. And when her butt goes on the ground and the release of the pressure, yes, that's what I wanted, okay? All right, so let's look at a couple of things with different ways to go about it. Maintaining the position of 4 on the floor, right? We can reinforce them for standing or sitting, one or the other, just not jumping, and we can negatively punish the dog for offering to jump up so that I can get more polite behavior when I enter the cage. Okay, to the contrary, right? We're going to positively punish jumping by taking their space, kind of walking into them, yielding them a little bit. And we are going to take that pressure off when they've got 4 feet on the floor. So this is actually a combination of a couple of things. So this is just a young guy. He hasn't learned a lot. He's kind of jumpy, not dangerous behavior over, just exuberant, jumpy behavior. So I am positively reinforcing him for showing up with me and not being distracted by the camera. So every time he arrives at me, I'm going to positively reinforcement, but I ideally don't want him jumping on me. So I try to just kind of ignore him for a second and just try to focus on what I want to reinforce him for with a positive reinforcement. So yeah, I'm kind of lifting my hands again, and then that's positive punishment for jumping. So I'm going to walk into him and take his space instead of turning away from him, because turning away from him might reinforce his jumping more. So that's me positively reinforcing him for showing up without jumping. And then I'm positively punishing him for when he's jumping. And when he gets 4 feet on the floor, I'll take that pressure off and go back to positively reinforcing him for not jumping. Okay. All right, clicker training. Why do we need to do this in a shelter environment? First of all, what is a marker? It is that thing that predicts that something reinforcing is coming. And as we know from the classical conditioning work of Pavlov, we know that we can even create physiological responses, right? So your brain is firing, woo, I got that right, when you hear that marker. So that gives us the opportunity to mark a dog for doing an aspect of a behavior. Maybe we're trying to build upon something, but we can mark them in a really timely way to say that right there, that's what I wanted. And then you can go wandering on off and go get your treats. You don't have to worry about the delay in getting the treat to them because you've added the marker. The brain is already salivating at the marker, right? That's the beauty of it. So it gives you time to get to the reward that is most meaningful to the dog. This is why you don't have to have your food in hand right away all the time, right? And in the shelter environment, most specifically because of the loud kennels and everything, it's really a crisp, clean, distinct sound that the dogs can hear through all that. And it also generalizes to people because if we all say yes in a little bit of a different way, I do like verbal markers and I think they're very effective. And I don't know what the latest research is about how much more effective a clicker is. I'm not exactly sure, but I know there's been some research done that it's not actually that significant. You can use a verbal marker, but I do like the clicker when you're in really loud, noisy environments so the dogs can focus and hear it no matter who's doing it. Okay. So better timing and rewarding approximations, better generalization between handlers, and it can really build some nice trust. So for a deaf dog, for example, we're using a thumbs up.
January 27, 2013. And this is Maria doing place with Adrian, who is mostly, if not all, deaf. So she's using sign.
Yeah, so you'll see Maria's a good distance away from that place board. So it's very clear that Adrian knows you want me to go to that place. You don't want me to just show up on the place in front of you. I'm supposed to go to that thing. And so her marker for this dog is the thumbs up. Means that's what I wanted. That's what's going to earn you your reward. And then she can take her time to getting to the reward. And then in this one, building trust. So this behavior, this is a muzzle up behavior. This is a dog that was extremely defensive to any kind of vetting and handling, actually. And so we taught him to, what's the word? I always forget. Not consent. On his own decision, he's putting his face in the muzzle, right? So we used mark and reward and approximations, free shaping to train him to put the muzzle on willingly. I can't remember the right word for that. And this was not his favorite thing when he got started. This is rubble.
Muzzle up.
Yes.
Good boy. Listen. Good boy. Rumble. Good boy.
And the whole point, we're just gonna let you see it because he does it again. It's not like he's like, I don't love it. But there he goes. He's like, all right, I'll do it. I know what I'm supposed to do. And the whole point of training him and taking the time to use approximations and to mark and reward him for looking towards the muzzle, then putting his nose in the muzzle, then keeping his nose in the muzzle, then keeping his head there while you put it all on and everything, is that it's less stressful for him. So it becomes a more consent-based behavior, right? Instead of just forcing it on him and making a scary situation scarier by just shoving a muzzle on his face, right? So that's the value in doing all that kind of stuff. You guys have, if you've seen the playgroup seminar, you've seen this before. This is a layman's term version of the core 4 quadrants slide, right? So the rewards and corrections, the rewards would be the reinforcement, corrections would be the punishment. And this could be a big, much longer list of these things. I just used a couple that we most of us think of. See the big bar at the bottom that's holding it all up, which is pressure and release. For our program, we love pressure and release work. We think it's so critical. If you're going to be an excellent shelter dog trainer, especially, you will learn to embrace and become very good at the application of positive punishment and negative reinforcement, which is pressure and release work, because when you don't have anything positively reinforcing for the dogs, you still can be teaching them and supporting them. Okay, so the application of pressure equals as a correction, as positive punishment. The release of pressure equates to a reward, an extremely meaningful reward for many, many, many living beings. And that's the negative reinforcement. And in our playgroups in particular, you see us teaching people how to use aversives appropriately. And we use squirt bottles, shake hands, and then there's a couple of other startling tools too. We all consider those to be aversives in the context of playgroups, or if you're going to use these for any other training purpose. But something to consider. That when I was used to run agility, there was a little Boston Terrier that used to run his laps or whatever. And then his mother would run off the field and go grab a squirt bottle and start squirting in the face because that was his favorite game. So for that little Boston Terrier, oh, the squirt bottle, sorry, I missed that one. The squirt bottle actually should be over here under the rewards. And similarly, there's plenty of dogs that I know that you've worked with, really fearful dogs, that we try to pet them, but petting at that time is actually frightening to them because they're not ready, they don't trust us, they're terrified, they think we mean them harm. And so for them, that petting could be actually incredibly aversive, right? Us even showing up and coming in their kennel could be incredibly aversive to them. So the key takeaway of all of this is that Our personal opinions don't matter. It's the dogs that will always decide. Your student, right? Your subject that you're trying to teach is always the one that will decide what is reinforcing and what is punitive for them. Our opinion does not matter. So this is a really poignant example that we use in tons of sessions. This dog was being worked in a positive reinforcement relationship-based program. They've been working with him for 3 months, and this is where they were. So in my opinion, this was not working, and therefore they should have abandoned this strategy much, much sooner because it wasn't effective in helping the dog to do better.
Are you okay?
He's actually not pushing. Oh my God, he's pushing. Want to try a spray bottle? I think it might have a difference. The other thing is try not moving your arms so much. Every time you move your arm, it makes it a game. There you go. Good. Good.
Okay, I'm going to spare you guys the barking dogs again. So this is Pierce, and obviously his behavior, this jumpy mouthy behavior is super risky. Like this has got to stop. It's not safe, right? You could see she was trying to offer him, she was trying to redirect him to a toy. You know, all the strategies that are classic for positive reinforcement, those are all good strategies to try in the beginning, but it's not working if 3 months later this is where we still are. So we did give her the aversive of the squirt bottle to see if that would be effective for him, which it was. And then the really good news is even though this is a super frustrated dog, right? He's still taking treats. And a lot of times they won't take treats because they're so frustrated. So this is great. We have a really meaningful positive reinforcer for him. And we also have a really effective punisher for him. So an aversive that we can use to say, I don't want you jumping and mouthing me, and we're not going to exit the kennel when you're behaving that way. You can do anything else but that, and we can proceed together. And so we can be reinforcing the stuff that we do want while we're punishing the stuff that we don't want. Now she's got to go in there and get that leash off of him now. So she's going to start all over again, the process. So she's not going to reinforce him jumping up. She's going to wait. He does want her in the kennel because he wants to leave with her, right? So she's going to wait until 4 feet are on the ground, and that's when she's going to go ahead and enter. So that I'm going to positively reinforce you. I'm adding myself to reinforce you for 4 feet on the floor. I'm going to reinforce you with cookies. If you keep those 4 feet on the floor, if you're doing anything but jumping and mouthing at me, he even offers to sit. And how great is that? So the question is it inhumane to squirt him with a squirt bottle, or is it inhumane not to squirt him with a squirt bottle? In our opinion, if it takes you 3 months and that's as far as you've gotten, then it was inhumane to not provide him the information that's useful and meaningful to him, so that we get less of the behavior that we really can't have and we can get to more of the behavior that we do want. So in short, the best from us, balancing all this kind of stuff, using corrections for what must stop, using the learning theory, right? Using all of the science as it's designed, corrections for what we must stop, rewards for the things that we want more of, and ABCs of training. I'm sure you've heard of antecedent to behavior and consequence. Those are technical terms for stuff that I've already described to you. And just to let you know, in this photograph, the woman in the purple jacket that's looking at her dog in that photograph, that was in Edmonton, Canada. And she was actually crying in that video because her dog, she'd been in an internship with a veterinary behaviorist. She'd been trying to train that dog for 2 years. He had bitten her badly up and down her arms because he was a extreme unleash reactive dog with redirection to her. And she'd been through a remote collar trainer. She'd been through heavy meds with her dog. She had never been able to be in proximity to other dogs with her dog for years and was being injured by him. And this was in 1 day of us working all the stuff that I'm going to introduce you to here. And that was the result, that she get right in line with everybody else with her dog on a nice soft leash. And so she was very emotionally moved by that. So in short, you guys have heard this saying, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything becomes a nail. We are tool junkies. We want a full toolbox. So all of the stuff are things that we will use in our training programs. And you guys might not be able to use all these tools because you might have policies in place at your shelters. But sharing with you that when I have come to shelters and they've been really restrictive about their tools, we try to work on helping them with that so that they can be more comprehensive for their dogs. Of course, you guys know for us, our number one behavior modification tool is playgroups. We always start there. So I'm not going to belabor this slide at the moment. This is just a picture of, at the Longmont Humane Society, our kennels. We had designed the kennels so that we had a lower stimulation area for the dogs to walk out of. Instead of having to put the plastic on, we built the kennels this way. But you notice a couple of pieces of equipment, different equipment on their kennels, and then we would even let people know if the dogs were acclimating to a gentle leader. We gave them explicit instructions. Please have them wear the gentle leader, but don't hook up to it yet, blah, blah, blah. In short, with this, stimulation collars, which a lot of people have a lot of sensitivity to, that's the modified plastic pinch collars. You can see one hanging there. Metal pinch collars are remote collars. Again, you might not even be allowed to use those tools, but to us, they are phenomenal, especially for dogs that are heavy and kind of desensitized and they want to drag you all over the place. We love using those collars to make them more sensitive. Head halters are our first choice for dogs that are reactive because you have better control of the head and the face, and you can help guide them to break eye contact with something that they're stimulated by. I'm not going to get into this a ton. You can definitely send us some questions about this, about tools if you'd like, but here's an example. This is the Longmont Humane Society. These are the level 3 volunteers. And again, these are volunteers. You'll see all different pieces of equipment on these dogs, right? You'll see them handling a little bit similarly. Now, these are volunteers. They're not as strong as the handlers, the trainers and handlers that you saw in the beginning, but they're learning all their skills. So what we want is the dogs on a nice soft leash when they're doing well. We don't want them dragging around with their hands. We want them marking, rewarding everything that they like, which is the dog by their side and giving them eye contact. And all the dogs are on different tools. The different tools do not mean that you need to handle differently. It just accentuates your handling differently. So there's some examples for you. Okay, so the most rewardable behavior, especially if you want dogs walking politely for you on leash, is eye contact. Now, interestingly, we don't cue for it. We will prompt it minimally in the beginning, like I'll make a kissing sound or something if a dog just seems completely has no desire to look towards my face. But we don't do like a watch me, look at me command. I don't lure them up to my face at all. I'll just maybe doing a little bit of prompting. We just capture and reward like crazy when they do it, and it creates the default behavior of checking in with your handler, no matter what's happening around you, okay? The like nice googly eyes like that when they're looking right at you, we mark and reward that like crazy. So introducing this concept of fancy footwork, and the reason that we call it fancy footwork is kind of so dumb. It comes from my old horse training days. And I was really curious why we couldn't use pressure and release with dog handling like we do with horses. And I was also watching people walking around shelters and trying to get dogs to heel, and they're telling them heel, and they're jerking on them all the time. And I thought, God, that's terrible. Why would I, as a dog, want to come out of a kennel and have to walk right by someone's side and be jerked if I get out of that position? I'm frustrated. I want to like do dog things. I want to sniff. I want to explore. Like, what a drag to have to work like that, right? So the point of fancy footwork is that we have to be moving our hands a lot less, and we think about fixing all leash problems with our feet first. And that comes from horse training. For those of you that ride horses, right? You know, you don't go to your hands first, you sit down in your saddle first. For those of you that don't ride horses, that won't make any sense to you, but it's techniques that I brought from that. So here's a great example of one of our volunteers that's learning to keep his hands dead quiet, and he can communicate with his feet. If his dog moves forward and pulls on the leash at all while he's coming out of the kennels, he's just going to use his footwork to fix it.
Good girl.
Hey, good girl.
Good girl. There you go. Oh, good. Perfect footwork. Very nice.
Yay, good girl.
Nice. Good girl.
This way, this way.
And right up that door.
Yeah, so he did a beautiful job, and it was awkward for him. It's very hard for us not to want to use our hands to drag the dogs around, but that's number one, is teaching people to stop going to your hands first, okay? We reward eye contact like crazy. Like I told you, what they're looking at is what they're thinking about, right? So they're probably not doing anything wrong if they're looking lovingly and adoringly or inquisitively into your eyes, right? It's always a good thing. We want the leash to be, first of all, the leash functions as a tether so that the dog can't just wander off and do what they want. You know, when we're out in public, we have our dogs tethered to us. But none of us want to be tethered to a dog that's dragging us around all the time, right? So dogs should be soft on leash, just like I want a horse to be soft under saddle or soft in hand, right? So I just wanted to teach dogs to be soft to pressure. Like when you feel pressure, that means you need to make an adjustment, right? So the leash is communication and our ability to reinforce the dogs more than the thing that's going to drag them around and make them do what we want. The most consistent handler error that we fix with everybody is dragging the dogs around with your hands. I'm being so redundant.
Okay, it's August 30th, and we have Kate from Baltimore Humane. She's working Nina. And Souley is over there. He's working Arlo. Arlo is a behavioral transfer from Animal Farm. They know that this is kind of our favorite thing, working with really rowdy, obnoxious dogs. So they gave us the privilege of working with Arlo, and he's doing great. So Bernice, there's your boy. And Kate's the trainer down at Baltimore Humane. And Arlo is the kennel manager. I mean Arlo. Souley. Souley is the, keep that hand down, keep it still. Souley is the kennel manager. They're here to learn about play groups and our training program. And they just did loose leash walking, which turns into what looks like an off leash heel when they get good at their footwork and their marking and rewarding. Nice. That was a beautiful, the way you repositioned yourself with your footwork there was perfect, Souley. So Kate, yours looks pretty easy. Kate and Nina are doing awesome. All right.
Okay. So that that exercise gets people used to not being able to use their hands to get the dog where they want them. Okay, so use your hands minimally and sensitively. Save them for the good stuff. Try not to maintain that tension and that contact all the time, because that tension goes right down the leash to the dogs. Keeping your hands low is usually pretty helpful for that. Sometimes people have their hands way up high because they're trying to keep the leash from bagging and sagging. I think you just saw some of that in that last video. But ideally, you want to try to just shorten your length and keep your hands low as a habit. Here's a good one of somebody walking through the kennels, practicing the same thing again. Even though the dog's reactive. Notice that dog was on a chain leash because that dog had a leash climbing habit. So we were starting to change their handling so that they're not arguing with the dog with a leash. And that is what invites, we are excellent in training leash climbing dogs. And how we train leash climbing dogs is when they are frustrated and reacting and we shorten up, tighten up, and we start pulling them around, that will weaponize the leash to them and make them start trying to grab that leash and take it back away from you. We are the ones that train that behavior. Okay. So if you notice, that dog didn't try to grab the leash once, and that's because she kept her hands low and she wasn't arguing with him with it. And then you move your feet instead and keep your hands still. I just showed you that video. That's redundant, but here's one that's more exaggerated. Now, in this video, Steve does have plenty of room. I know many of you are dealing with coming down the center of a row with dogs going nuts on both sides. So this isn't as good of an example for you guys. That just means you have to shorten the length of your leash, but still keep your hands low and quiet, and be moving your feet the opposite way of where the dog is reacting to, if you had the dog reacting at dogs on either side of you. But here's an example of him. This is a dog that has no skills. So he's not going to train a leash climbing dog by jerking him around and pulling him. He's dead quiet with those hands, and notice that he's leaning his body weight and his using his momentum to keep the dog from having access to the dogs in the kennels. He does not want to bring that energy back on him. That's why he's keeping those hands low and just moving his feet. If necessary, stick your thumb in your pocket if you have a bad habit of using your hands.
All right, 1 and 2 and 3 and circle left. Now look at that. Not a single one of these dogs needed any support. You have to circle left and then go back into your big circle. Al, why don't you get out on the outskirts and just work him? Because I don't want, he's not the right one for you to practice this stuff because he's probably going to protest. All right, so try it again. Thumb in your pocket. 1 and 2 and circle left.
Prevent you from trying to steer the dog.
Just one little circle to the left and then back into your big circle.
When you do pull or hold, you do create that moment of oppositional reflex where the dog is going to want to go the opposite direction of where you're trying to pull them. It happens to all of us. If I was standing next to you and I started to pull you towards me, you would lean away from me. If I started to push you away from me, you would lean into me because you're trying to get back into the into balance, right? So that's what oppositional reflex is about. And we just don't even realize how much we start all these problems by being the ones that pulls on the leash first. If you become master leash handlers, your transition to off leash is going to be a lot smoother and faster, and the dogs are just going to love you for it. And if you've never seen any of Dr. Sophia Yin's videos, she has passed. That's why I have a little heart next to her. She was a dancer with dogs. She was big into, she would put a waist leash on herself all the time, just like you're going to see in this video. And she would just use her footwork beautifully to, I would call her a dancer with dogs, right? But here's a waist leash. This is another way for you to get really good at it so that you're out of the habit of relying upon your hands too much. Okay. So generally speaking, when we want the dogs to walk politely on leash, want to get them to that loose leash walking, we're going to use all 4 of these quadrants to help them kind of put it together. So examples of positive reinforcement are giving them treats when they're on a nice soft leash, praising them, proceeding, petting them if they like that, right? Positive punishment would be changing directions. And if you need to accentuate and make it more meaningful, if the dog is like really persistent, then you're changing direction quickly, or you're yielding them by doing left-hand circles. We're going to give you some examples of that. Or you can give them active leash corrections, but that's our last strategy. Negative punishment would mean that I'm not going to proceed with you when you're acting like this, right? That would be stopping possibly and not proceeding, taking away our progress, right? And negative reinforcement would be, hey, when I'm moving away from you and you come towards me, you get a softer leash, which releases that pressure on you, which we would hope would be reinforcing to you. So it's really, for us, this is a fluid game of red light, green light. We don't just stand and stop, because for many dogs, that's just, they don't care. They'll just bounce at the end of the leash. It's like not intense enough for them. So we just add movement to it. So here you go, loose leash walking. The goal, see, this picture is perfect. Doesn't matter where the dog is in proximity to you. They don't have to be on the left side. They can have whatever length of leash that you've given them. It could be 2 feet, 3 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet. Does not matter. It just means that they're not going to pull on that leash. They can sniff and explore and be a dog. I don't want them to feel like they either have to be walking by your side or they're dragging you everywhere. And it's for both the dog and handler to enjoy a walk together, an enriching walk outside of their kennel instead of having to be working on a heel. So setting up for this is we're going to make sure that your hands are holding the handle only, or you've selected, if you're in tight quarters and you can't give them the full length, you've set your hands at a length and you're not going to change that length. You're setting your length. Okay. And your hands are going to be against your body or low and quiet. If you're advanced enough and you don't need to pin your hands, right? You can just make sure that they're low and quiet. Shoulders nice and relaxed and prepared to use your feet to adjust to the dogs. So do I not have volume on this? Oh, I guess I muted this video. So if you notice, again, if they're walking together, it doesn't matter where the dog is, these guys are proceeding if the leash is soft. They don't care what the dogs are doing or where they are, as long as the leash is soft. If the dogs put any pressure on that leash, they're just going to move away from the dog with their feet. And when the dog checks in with them and the leash is soft, they're going to mark them, and then they're going to feed them in position at their left-hand side. And the purpose is loose leash walking. There you go. Dog was anticipating coming to me. She moved away and then marked a reward for the eye contact. Okay, so there's your loose leash walking. Get the gist. We're going to get into now some more training stuff, which pertains to your kennel routines, door routines, all that kind of stuff. So these are a couple of things that DPFL considers all the time. The 3 R's, we call them. Reinforcement, we want to be so mindful of what is actually reinforcing to the dogs, right? And we want to provide them with reinforcement when we want more of a behavior. And that is our responsibility, to notice the dog's actions and reinforce them effectively so we get more of what we want. Reminding dogs means I'm going to put you through some paces. I'm going to test you a little bit. So I'm going to tell you, we're going to start a trial right now. So I want you to practice, for example, holding a sit, or I think in this one, it's holding it down. I want you to hold the down because things are going to start happening around you, right? So this is staying in behavior. So we will remind the dog each trial, your job is bleh, whatever behavior I want you to stay in. And it's weird because when you're reminding, it means the dog is already in the position that you want them to be. And you're telling them something's about to happen, so do your job of down.
All right, so remind.
Down.
Take 1 step. Click. Nice. Now go back in reward order. Nice. Good position.
Down.
And I want you to say down instead of down. Click. Beautiful.
Notice that she reminds before she moves.
Down.
Nice. I like the approximations that you're taking as well. You're making it difficult while also setting her up for success, right?
Down.
Okay.
So that's reminding and then marking and rewarding for allowing me to walk away from you and you holding position, staying in behavior. Recommanding, on the other hand, is bad habit. We want to get out of that habit. That means you've told the dog to down, the dog breaks position, right? And you just ask them to down again, and then you reward them for laying down. That you're going to inadvertently teach the dog a pattern of, I'm going to break the behavior so that you ask me to do it again, and then you're going to reinforce me. So it's very hard to get a nice, sticky, stationary position if you make the mistake of recommanding and then rewarding them for listening to your recommand. Hard habit to break, but we focus on that. It's a big one. And then we've got the progression when we want to start expanding the dogs. We've taught you this basic behavior. Now we want you to actually do it no matter what's happening around them. We don't want to keep them in kindergarten if they're ready for high school, right? So we want to expand their abilities, right? So the 3Ds means distance, duration, and distraction. So if I ask you, does your dog know how to sit? Yes. 1 second, and you have to go get a cookie before you ask your dog to sit. Dog's not trained yet, right? In my opinion, right? The only way that you say, does your dog know a sit, is that you say the word sit no matter where the dog is in relationship to you, as long as they can hear you and their butt will go to the ground. Dr. Ian Dunbar has an amazing video of that from, I swear to God, it must be 30 years ago, but he had an Akita and he was talking to the camera and the Akita was in the field way in the background. And he's talking to the camera. He said, if your dog knows how to sit, and he says, I can't remember the dog's name, blah, 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 sit. And he doesn't even look at him. The dog is like way behind him, 30 feet behind him. And the dog is sniffing, walk around, sit, stands up, and then boom, puts his butt to the ground. Doesn't even turn around to look at his dad. That's a trained sit, okay? I'm just going to show you a quick version of this.
All right, so BB is going to demo. We've got our Santa Fe Humane interns, Emily, Hannah. There's Christy McKean, our new...
For the sake of not having to watch this whole video, I'm actually going to narrate for you. So all of these dogs do have some training on them. And so we're proofing their stationary behavior. That once we ask them, we cue them to down, they need to stay in that behavior until they're released or told to do something else. So BB, the gal with the blue vest on here, she's just providing distractions, different things that would be tempting. Now, if you notice, everybody has their foot on the leash. This one here closest to you, that's just a little bit tight because we don't want you to be restraining. Same one with the dog that's working now. We don't want the dogs restrained in the position. We just want the leash tacked so that if they start to stand up, they'll just like that. They'll feel the pressure from that leash being tacked. So they know, oh, I've got to make an adjustment because being up here in the stand is not comfortable because I've got a little pressure on me. Going down into the laying back down is going to release that pressure, which is the first reward. And then if they're positively reinforced instead, that means they get double reinforcement for staying in the down, right? And then they get mildly punished for breaking the down. Okay, so all these little distractions, and what they're waiting for is not only holding the down, but they want them to look at the handler. So that's what they're ultimately marking and rewarding for. She's like, you got cookies in your hand, lady. And watch Cowboy here. He does the best job at this one, I think. He's like, I really want those cookies. Right. So he gets rewarded, positively reinforced for staying in behavior and checking with his handler. Okay. We go on to more and more ball distractions and everything, but you get the gist. So ultimately, the dog is responsible for behaving. This slide, for those of you, this is the ABCs of training, right? I should change that instead of the aha moment, the ABCs of training. An antecedent is going to show up. That's the A is in ABCs, antecedent, right? The dog is going to behave any way that they're going to behave, and then there's a consequence for the choice that they make. It could be a reinforcer or a punisher. And the purpose of this is to get more of the behavior we want, less of what we don't want. So we are responsible for making sure that they get the consequences that we want them to get, depending upon if we want more or less. But they're just responsible for behaving authentically, however they want to behave. And based upon our training, hopefully they will make more and more of the choices that we want them to make independently on their own. That's called clinical training.
Yeah. So this is Arby, their problem child. And he was doing a lot of redirecting and mouthing and grabbing and bad shenanigans. So we're going to see how he works. So he should go to place before you even come in. There you go.
So So just to let you guys know, Arby came to our canine center, this from Jacksonville Humane Society, and these guys came to bring us another dog, and they wanted to visit with Arby. So he was bruising people. The jumpy mouthy was pretty extreme, like that dog Pierce that you've already seen. So you can see his handlers from his home shelter are just don't really trust that he can do this, but we're like, he really can.
Yes, and then you can mark that, and like he activates you to go through the process by being on his place. If he steps off, it's just like, well, we're not proceeding. And you're welcome to walk them in the big area. You're welcome to just, I would step back a little bit towards the place, but you don't have to, yes, good boy. You can walk him in the free roam area. You can free roam him if you'd like, as long as we radio that it's clear. You can let him off leash and recall him, or you can take him to a yard. You can do whatever you want. He will hold that position while you come open the door. Yep. Yeah, when you open it wide. And you, whenever you're ready. How do you like that? That was beautiful. And we just put a strange dog next to him, which he was pretty wound up about, right? So that was awesome. Do you mind closing that door for me, honey? And at this door here, hopefully you're going to see him just offer a sit automatically.
By the way, I don't know if you guys saw that Arby thought it kind of started to jump up and then thought, oh, that's right, I'm not supposed to do that. So he does a beautiful environmental cue for that door, which is great. He does cheat a little bit here. He goes too soon. But anyway, we let them go on. But anyway, she was psyched that he was so much more mannerly, right, by putting all this together. So teaching a release is also incredibly important because we don't want them to guess when they can actually, oh, can I come out of the behavior now? Am I ready to go, right? We use free. I made the mistake when I used to do studio training. I remember I used to say, okay. The problem is that I use that in common language a lot. So I remember being on the set and then we were in between takes and then the director wanted to talk to me. So I reminded my dog to hold their position. I sit her down or something. I can't remember. And then I went up to the director and we were talking. And I said, okay. I heard what and the dog released and came over to me, right? Because he thought I had released him. So we use free because we don't typically walk around and say free in normal language, right? It is important that you use a verbal cue only, or if it's a deaf dog, your visual cue, and that you don't let it be your body language associated. You do not want to classically condition that when I step is when I'm going to release you, because then the dogs they will ignore what they hear and they will always go for your body language first, because that's the easiest thing for them to read. So here's a perfect example.
Schroeder's F-R-E-E. Potato. Read. Free. Good boy.
There. So she was just testing that he was going to wait for the actual word. I've already said all the rest of that. Okay, so teaching kennel routines. Most important thing that I want you guys to really take away about this, from this, is that, you know, once you've hit what we call the every dog, every day model, which means that your dogs are all getting an out of kennel enrichment experience at least every day. Some of you, thankfully, can get your dogs out multiple times a day. Some of you, unfortunately, are struggling with not being able to get your dogs out every day. And that's where we start. Like, before you start trying to do more advanced training or BMOD, you've got to get this foundational stuff of all your dogs getting out of your kennel enrichment. That's the foundational piece, right? But the next level is if you don't have a training and behavior department and you don't think that you have the resources to do BMOD, you can do this basic training for all shelter. It doesn't hurt. This also prepares them well for a home, right? If you teach a kennel routine, that means that you're not going to be teaching active door darters. When we do crack and slip, if you're at a shelter that doesn't allow you to go into the kennels to work with the dogs and you crack, slip them and take them out, we are actively training door darting dogs. That's what we're doing, right? And again, if we mess everything up and we're teaching them to leash climb, we want to do all the opposite of that while they're with us. It's so mentally stimulating for the dogs to learn this kennel routine. They all can learn it. It benefits all of them. It doesn't hurt any of them. And so why not, every time we're interacting with the dogs, get some of this basic training done? So breaking it all down, we're going to start by finding a rewardable moment to enter. So if you've got a really active dog that's yelling at you, jumping, going nuts, we're just going to at least wait for their feet to land on the ground. We're just going to wait for anything that's more polite than what they're doing, any approximation, and we're going to wait for that moment to enter. There it is. I lost it. Where is it? There we go. So that dog wasn't doing anything wrong, but he also didn't have any skills yet. So that's why Michael said, I like that. That's plenty polite. I will enter your kennel when you look like that, right? So he just waited for anything that looked good to enter because the dog didn't know anything else. When possible, you might have a policy against this, or there might be a safety reason. Enter your kennels. We strongly advise that you go into the kennel to start teaching the dog, as you just watched. Your tone of voice is going to convey your intent to the dog. So I'm a big believer, and I nag our team's like crazy about this. Even when you're in a really loud kennel and you think that they can't hear you, I think just even energetically, you should be talking to the dogs like, hey, buddy, whatever you need to do to make them feel like I'm coming in and I want to be friendly to you. They might not believe you in the beginning. They might be afraid or whatever. But if you're consistent and you proceed with that voice, that you're going to classically condition to that positive tone of voice means positive things are going to happen. Okay. Pair equipment with food to create a positive association with that too, especially if you're putting any kind of head halters on them, because while they're very effective tools, the dogs typically do not enjoy them at first. So we have to get them acclimated to them and desensitized to them. So I always pair food when I'm putting a collar on, because none of us, if I walked up to you and grabbed you by the collar, you would find that really offensive. And we handle dogs around their neck, this sensitive area, so much. And so I reward them for letting me do that because it's so rude, right? And then we use the door or the gate to correct their door darting at first. You know, they don't know. They think you open the door, then here we go. So we're going to start introducing them. No, that open door is not your cue to exit. We're going to wait for something else. So this is the very first step. Little puppy. So this little puppy doesn't know yet. So the leash prevents her from just walking away. And she's just cracking that door. She got to get her around the front. Cracking the door and waiting for the puppy to pause and not try to go out and check in with her. And that's how we're going to start going outdoors now, right? We're just going to start with that one little piece. Sounds like you might have switched to a different language. Silly. Okay, I did not switch. I don't know what sounded like a different language. We're then going to mark and reward approximations of any behaviors that we want to build upon or make better. So in our situation, we usually have a coranda bed and we teach a place behavior in the kennels, as you've already seen. If you don't have that ability, I would suggest that you teach the dogs to sit to get you to come into the kennel, and they hold the sit while you go through the whole routine. So I'd be marking and rewarding approximations of sitting and then holding sitting no matter what. Use all 4 quadrants to increase the behaviors that we want and decrease the behaviors that we don't want. And you saw me in the kennel with that dog Chalk, where he was jumping up at me like crazy, young exuberant dog. And I just kind of walked into him like, dude, that's rude. I'm going to take that space from you. Get off me type thing. With high arousal, you can also, if I feel like the dog doesn't have any skills yet, I will go to just, wrestling to get a collar on them that a leash is already attached to. So I immediately can just step on that leash if they're very bouncy dogs, and then they can self-correct because they're not thinking, they're just trying to clamber all over me like a puppy. And so then I don't want to be mad at them for that. I don't blame them, but I can set up the scenario so that they can self-correct by jumping, by putting that leash on first. She is going to mark and reward him for any of the polite stuff in the non-jumping, but she set herself up with that foot on that leash so that she can just wait him out and let him self-correct if he's bouncing up a lot. She was a little bit tight on the leash in the beginning, and I like to see that she backed off because I don't want to restrain him in the sit. I just want that length so that if he jumps, boom, he's going to get a little self-correction from that. If the dog's behavior, by the way, is concerning or unmanageable and you just don't feel safe, always trust your gut. Never do something you feel unsafe with. You can start teaching this stuff outside, right? You don't have to teach it in their kennel initially, but why not? If you have a dog that's agreeable and biddable and is responding, especially if they can take positive reinforcement, go ahead and start training it in the kennel. But if you feel like the dog is beside themselves and just can't process and think that through yet, just do what you need to do to get them out safely. Go burn off some energy. Hopefully they get to go to playgroups, or go throw a chuck it with them. By the way, if you guys are going to play fetch with balls in shelters, I always like use a chuck it just for safety. Just may as well condition them to that. Just saying. Do something to burn their energy, and then you can start teaching them to go to place or holding their sit outside. And then when they're all kind of satisfied, better satiated, you can come back into their kennel and be teaching them to hold the sit in the kennel while you're practicing putting a collar on and off, for example, right? But the finished product, you've already seen some examples of it, but I'll show you another one, is that from outside of the kennel, your dog understands you're presenting yourself, I'm here to take you out, and you're just going to wait them out, and they will offer you whatever behavior you've trained, either the going to place or the sit, to get you to come in the kennel, and they will maintain that behavior the entire time that you put their equipment up, you open the door, and then you release them to exit.
This is Yasmin getting Polo out. He's being ready.
By the way, this is a novel handler for this dog. They've never met before.
Oh boy. Nice.
So Polo wasn't quite advanced enough to go to place with a novel handler on the outside. With his known handlers, we would just stand there and wait him out and he would go to place. So for her, he was like, he didn't quite do that, but he's doing well with all the rest of it. But the final frontier is that he would even send to place, even for a strange handler.
Nice. That was beautiful, Polo.
Okay. So the one thing, this last bullet point down here, I want to kind of reiterate to you guys. We do build on this training. Even in the morning when the dogs have to go to the bathroom really badly, if we have put enough training into them, we expect them to do this full routine. If they don't have their skills yet and they're just like, they can't think because they have to go to the bathroom so badly, I'll kind of rush them through, or I'll take a lesser approximation just to get them out. But when I'm putting dogs away and we're going back to the kennel, we don't let them be unmannerly. We don't let everything go out the window. I'll tend to walk through doorways ahead of them for the sake of making sure that they don't end up nose to nose with another dog or something. But I don't make them work hard and do door routines on their way back to their kennel, because ultimately we recognize that being put in your kennel is probably relatively punitive to most of the dogs. They prefer to not have to go back to their kennel. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they want to go back and relax. But generally speaking, we assume that being in the kennel isn't the most fun. So we don't make them work so hard when we put them away. We make them work hard to get out, okay? So a working walk, now interestingly, we've opted recently to remove working walk from our like fancy footwork webinars, or excuse me, seminars and everything, because we're recognizing it's hard enough for everybody to get the kennel routines and the loose leash walk down. But I do want to show you what our next step is to teach what we call a working walk, which is going to look like a heel, not a competition heel. We're not competition trainers, right? It's going to look like a heel that the dog is going to stay closer by your side. And this is really valuable, important. Boy, does it look nice. Adopters love to see that the dog can look like it kind of can heel. If you are working in tight quarters and you just really, it's not safe to let the dog be on a loose leash walk at the full length of the leash, and you want them to be more focused on you. That's part of the working walk. It's like we're not sniffing and exploring. We're a team together now, and we're going through our environment, working together, and I need you to remain engaged with me and look to me for direction. Whereas a loose leash walk is much more loosey-goosey. Like, do your doggy things, you just can't drag me, right? We're just hanging out together, chilling, just don't drag me around. A working walk is no like, I might need something from you, so stay engaged with me, okay? So when we're setting up for this, we're going to have you holding your leash in your right hand and hold it like a handle. Don't wear it like a bracelet over your wrist. And I know there are a lot of places that have a policy that you need to put your hand through the loop, and you have to have it on your wrist so that you can grasp the leash. And that supposedly is so that the dog can't pull out of your hands. If that's a policy, I can tell you, if I worked at your shelter, I would reject that policy. I would do everything I could to change it, because it actually can be incredibly unsafe. I don't know if any of you have ever seen somebody get pulled down by a dog, especially if it's a really large dog, and pulled over, and then usually their arm is extended if the dog is trying to chase a squirrel or do something. And then it's very hard for you to get away from the dog and to pull your hand out. You can't if you have it around your wrist at that time. So it's extremely dangerous. So I want you to be able to hold onto a leash without having it over your hand like a bracelet. And I learned that originally from Dick Russell way, way, way back when. We'll hold it like a handle, don't wear it like a bracelet. Same thing with collars. Fit them like a collar, don't fit them like a necklace, right? Your left hand is going to find your working length. And you can see in this picture here, it's where she just looks like if you took the dog out of this picture, if you photoshopped it out, she would just look like she was walking along with her hands by her side. And that's what we want you to look like. Very relaxed. Like I don't necessarily have a dog in my hand. The dog is staying with me. I'm not muscling this dog at all. Your working length is going to be different for every person and dog team because it depends upon the size of the dog in relation to you. So if I was walking a Great Dane next to me, my working length might just be this long. Whereas if I'm working a Chihuahua, my working length is going to be a lot longer, right? Because they're way down there, right? And if I use the same short length, I'd be stringing them up and they'd be dancing on their back feet. If I use the same length that I would use on a Great Dane, for example, right? You can use a knot or a marker if necessary on your own personal leash. I cannot stand knots and leashes, and when people do this, but some people, they feel like they just need, if you have a consistent dog that you're working, you can do that so that it marks for you, this is the proper working length for my dog. But I don't advise that you use leashes put knots and leashes that are at shelters where everybody has to use the leashes, because then it's not the knot might not be in the right place for the next person, okay? I'm going to have a pictorial of this next. You're laying your hand flat, your pinky and thumb under, and gently closing your hand. I'll show you a picture of that. And you want your shoulders nice and relaxed. So she doesn't look like she's holding and she's doing anything strict, like she's not in a marching band. She's just nice and chilled and relaxed, okay? And no slippery leash habit. So this means that if once I've decided I'm doing a working walk and I set my length, actually this pertains also to loose leash walking. If you set your length, right? Do not let that leash slide through your hand so that leash length changes, because that will be very confusing for the dog. They won't know what you're asking for. That should be very clear. When you go to here, you're going to feel pressure from that leash. That means you need to back up or scooch in closer to me to soften that leash, okay? So this is slippery leash. Oh no, I'm lying to you.
Let's switch to loose leash walk, you guys. Let's just see what that looks like.
Okay, so this is an example of the dogs are loose leash walking right now. So you're going to see them transition from a loose leash walk. So see how it doesn't matter where they are. They can be on either side of the handler. Wouldn't we all like to take our shelter dogs for a walk and have it be like this, right? So everybody's just chilling. Nobody's dragging anybody around. That's great. And I'm going to ask them to transition to a working walk. I want you to notice that none of the people pull the dogs into them. I think it's right about here that I ask them to. There we go. So they're already pretty close. So they just gather up that leash length, but notice they didn't pull the dog to them. They just gathered up their leash length. Now they have their working length. Their hand is set on that leash, their left hand. They're holding the handle in their right hand, and they're just moving along, and the dog's transitioned right into them nicely. And then now this is the only place that you can be where it's soft, is right by my side. Okay, that's the important part of having the correct working length, because that will signify to the dog what their safe range is, that sweet spot by your side. I think that I may have, okay, so this is how we hold our leashes. We lay our left hand on top of the leash, then we tuck our pinky and thumb under, and then we gently close our fist. And that's how we hold our leash. And that is specifically to prevent the dog from sliding that leash through your fingers. If you hold it like this, I call that a girly grip, where you just have an underhanded grip, it's very simple for them to pull that through your fist as opposed to having it woven through your fingers like that. There's also a professional dog handling. It's a leash lock, it's called. And again, this is how we teach volunteers and staff in shelters to hold leashes. There are only 3 mistakes that dogs will make on leash. And remember, if we think about the ABCs of training, there's an antecedent, the dog then behaves, and then there's a consequence for that choice, right? The antecedent in this situation would be that the dog is pulling on the leash, right? As a result of that pressure on the leash, okay, we're then going to respond to, it's not only just the pulling on the leash, sorry, it's one of these 3 things. We're walking along, we're trying to either working walk or loosely, we're trying to working walk. I'm so sorry, you guys. We're on working walk. So we're expecting the dogs to stay politely by our side, right? So the antecedent is the dog comes out of position. Let me be clear about what I'm trying to say. They're either going to pull on you, and that could be in any direction. They could be pulling forward, sideways, behind you, doesn't matter. If they're pulling on you, you're going to respond in a certain way. If they're forging, cutting in front of you, you're going to respond a certain way. And if they're ducking behind you, you're going to respond a certain way. And by you consistently providing these consequences for them coming out of position, they will learn very quickly this is the sweet spot. Okay, so for pulling, a drop and a go. This is a backwards drop and go.
Right, like right there, Jess. I would drop and go there. There you go. Yes! And then mark and reward when he catches up to you. Very good.
So that was because Pink was lagging behind. So he put pressure on the leash. He was pulling on her because he was lagging. Okay, so I'm going to let you guys watch that one more time. So as soon as the pressure,
right, like
she
right
drops
there, Jess.
her
I would
hand
drop and go there.
and goes with her feet.
There you go. Yes! And then mark and reward when he catches up to you. Very good.
And then he hustles up to get into that sweet spot position. Okay, so that's a drop and a go, but she's going forward because he's pulling on her backwards. If he was pulling on her forward, she would do that by stepping back, right? You always move the opposite direction of the dog. If the dog is forging and cutting in front of you, like tripping you up, we do either what's called close the door, which means we just step in front to block, or we do a full left-hand circle, and that's to yield and get them to concede that space. And it's really, left-hand circles have a whole slide on this, so let me just show you the example. This is a combination of some drop and goes and then into a left-hand circle.
This is Catherine, and whom do you have, Catherine?
I have Dingo.
Dingo. I've not met these. How was he with his kennel routine?
He didn't want to hold place, but nothing like squirrely or anything.
Okay. Yeah, he felt comfortable for you. He just needs work, right? Yeah, nice. Does he look like he's got to? Has he peed yet? Nice. Nice. So, Catherine, I can tell that you've got good instincts about using your movement to draw the dogs to you, right? You do that really well. I can tell you've worked on that. Think about sometimes getting them to yield and concede some space. You're doing the right thing with those drop and goes. Yeah, so if he's starting to kind of cut in front of you, remember straight up with that hand and try to work on that left-hand circle because I want that instinct to be as strong for you. Okay. That looks nice. Go left. Go left for me. Turn left. Straight up. Beautiful. And soften when you feel him hurt him. Hurt him. There you go. Yes. Nice. There you go. Nice. Very nice. Drop and go. Nice. Yes, Mark, right there. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Okay. And then if they duck behind you, we call this bubs. Back up, big step. It's very important that you do the backing up and the big step with the leg that is closest to the dog, like this.
So good.
He goes behind, she backs up, big step with the leg closest to the dog.
Wow, look at you.
I'm going to let you guys watch that one again.
So good.
So she doesn't change her hands at all. She just backs up into that leash, big step with the leg, makes it a nuisance to be over there. This is the whole point. These actions that I'm asking you to take create a nuisance for the dog to be doing what they're doing. And the only sweet spot that they have is when they land by your left-hand side, okay? And so here's the working walk, what it looks like. You saw this already. These guys were doing the loose leash walk with these dogs. Now they've transitioned to the working walk. So you see that working length. Notice how she's feeding with her left hand, by the way. The reason that we feed with our left hand is so that we don't encourage the dogs to forge in front of us and wrap to the other side to get it out of our right hand. That's why we feed in position with the left hand. So there's some drop and go. Feeding in position. Nice working length with her left hand. She marks and rewards him for looking, feeds in position, back to her nice working length. Again, marking reward for looking at her and then feeding in position. And I think she goes to one of them does a left-hand circle here. There's that left-hand circle because he was starting to forge in front of her. So he's conceding that space and dropping back a little bit. And the only one we don't, there's a drop and go because he decided to look at what was on the ground instead of staying with her. And another left-hand circle because he's starting to forge in front of her. So he's like, nope, that's my space. Now, Michael is doing right here, I think he picks up the leash, holds the leash in his right hand only, and that's totally acceptable when you're comfortable enough and advanced enough where you don't feel like you have to keep picking up with your left hand. Some people don't feel comfortable with that in the beginning. Okay, so that's the example of all that stuff. Oh, it's almost over. I'll just let it play out. Oh, I think that I'm in good shape here. Almost. Oh, yeah. Okay, so these perfecting your left-hand circles, people will really struggle with this. And the biggest reason that people struggle with this is they really tend to want to pull the dog out of their way. They want to hold the dog back with their left hand, right? And that's the big habit that we want to break for you. So you want to make sure that your shoulders and your elbows are relaxed at first. That's easier said than done. If you feel tension when you're walking with the dogs and when you're trying to practice this stuff, the best thing you can do is have someone or set up a camera so you can videotape yourself so you can see your body language and when you're holding intense and when you're putting your hand back when you shouldn't be. It's the best way to learn is by videotaping yourself, okay? Your hands are going to be quiet, and basically I don't ever want to see your hands go behind your hips to steer the dogs out of your way, okay? You're going to walk up nice and tall and straight. I don't want you to rush and lean and try to rush around the dogs really fast and beat them around the front. You want them to concede that space for you, okay? You're going to pick your pace and don't let the dogs change you, right? So if you're wanting to, like you're catching the bus and we're going and they're lagging behind, don't forget, use those drop and goes. No, I need you hustling. You need to stay up and keep pace with me. Similarly, if the dog is getting wound up and they're starting to forge ahead, don't pick up your pace to race around the front of them. You pick your pace, plod along consistently with it. Walk your circle and then go to your leash if you need to, right? So don't go to your leash first if you don't need to. If you start to walk your circle, and you were just watching, Annie just did that in the last video, she was just working him off her legs. He was kind of like wrapping his head around. She just kept walking, and eventually he's like, oh, okay, let me get out of the way of your legs. She didn't use her leash at all in that instant to support him. She just worked him off of her legs. But sometimes they're really trying to forge ahead, so we lift straight up with our hand to tell them, hey, that's not where you need to be. You need to make an adjustment. And then it's our legs that will show them where they need to go, which is set back, get out of my way. I'm taking that space. You get back here into your sweet spot position, okay? So if the dog does forge on you, you're going to apply gentle leash pressure up, right? Not back, to indicate that they need to make their adjustment.
Grab that trash can real quick.
Okay, turn left. Lower that hand a little bit. What happened? What happened?
You're correct, I don't.
Okay.
Ignore the radio chatter.
Nice, better. Nice, beautiful.
He's starting
now,
to
when you
forge.
feel that he's starting to go forward, right here, you'll see it in the video.
I'm actually going to just mute this. See how she's starting to kind of tuck her hand like this because she's wanting to hold him back. I'm telling you, you'll watch it in the video when I show you. When he starts to forge and she's feeling that resistance, I want her to go straight up like, hey, don't go there. And if he stops right there, she can just drop her hands, or she's going to turn her left-hand circle. But you're only going to touch when the leash straight up, not back. Straight up, because we don't want to create the oppositional reflex. If I put my hand back, it's going to drive them forward even more. Straight up, hey, don't go there, and then walk them in that circle. Slow down or hesitate rather than dragging them forward or trying to race them around the front. So if you have to, if I'm walking along and they start to forge and they're forging with some pressure, I'm like, hey, stop. We all stop. We're not going like that. Lighten up. Okay, now I'm going to take that space and go. Use your left leg to gently take the space. You don't have to bash them with your leg, not like that, but you can absolutely expect them to steer off of your leg. And then drop your left hand and soften the pressure once they've softened and they've ended up in that good spot.
Okay,
It's
so
me demoing like a dork.
When the dog starts forging, people tend to want to pull back and try to race around. And look at all that conflict, right? That's because when we pull back, it creates oppositional reflex, which kind of makes the dog want to drive forward. Good boy. So instead, if he's forging, I'm just going to lift my hand straight up, create a little bit of leash pressure right there that tells me he needs to make an adjustment. So instead of back here like this, just up like this, like, whoa, buddy, slow down. And then you're just going to step in and take that space. So no hands back here. No hands back here. Try to stop him. Up like this. And then you literally take the space and soften when he's soft. No hands back here.
Okay. One thing that when you are practicing your left hand circles is making sure that you're walking a big enough circle that the dog can walk it with you, that they don't have to pivot. Okay, it's pretty important. But you want it small enough so that they get the impact of the fact that you're yielding them with that left hand circle. Okay. And the other thing that I'm constantly telling people to try to improve their handling is make sure that you are looking where you're going and not always staring at the dog, right? Because your dog is supposed to be walking with you. You're not walking with your dog, right? So you want your head up. You want to be seeing what's going on in the environment. You want to make sure you can get both of you out of there if you need to change direction. So make sure when you have a dog in hand that you get used to, go by feel. You can feel if the dog is with you. And ideally, you don't want to keep that steady pressure. If it's nice and soft and you've got your leash on that working length, that's great. Check in with them every once in a while. They're looking at you, mark and reward that like crazy, feed them in that sweet spot. But then get your eyes back up and look where you're going.
Very nice with Kayla. You can reward her for that. That was great.
That's okay. Let me get,
Nice.
And I had just nagged at them all about keeping their eyes up. And so she's doing a beautiful job, almost robotically, like she's really trying, okay, keep my eyes up and keep my eyes up. And it's great because you can see how Kayla's like, hey, I'm with you. And she's checked in with her, which is great. And I definitely would have marked and rewarded Kayla for that one. So generally speaking, when we start teaching the dog some of these skills, what we always would tell our volunteers, and we had when we were at Longmont, that was the most recent shelter that I actually, brick and mortar shelter that I worked at other than our own training center. And we had level 4 levels of volunteers, and the level 4 volunteers were working very closely with the training and behavior department. And interestingly, a bunch of them changed their careers and actually opened their own dog training businesses, which is so fun. But at any rate, the motto that we would have for the rest of the volunteers that really didn't want to learn about training this much, but they wanted to go out and walk the dogs, were like, hey, we don't expect you to train, but please handle to maintain. That's what our expectation was. And I love this. This is a great story. This is at a Fancy Footwork seminar when the team went on the ground at a shelter. And this dog you can see is being walked on a chain leash. So she was a leash climbing dog. And so this gentleman is just explaining his experience of learning the Fancy Footwork techniques and how that feels for him.
She started outside when I first started walking her before I brought her in here, and she picked up on this real quick.
Awesome. How'd she do on the door routine?
Door routine was nice.
Good.
Door routine was nice.
You can click and feed her anytime too while we're talking if she's walking nicely for you on leash. Beautiful. So we were just saying that this is a dog who's blue for leash biting, on leash for activity and pulling. And you haven't seen any of that?
None.
Awesome. This is Irma.
Minor pulling, but nothing that we can't correct just by doing the Fancy Footwork.
Awesome. I love how attentive she is to you.
Lauren, was that Longmont? Am I lying to you? Was that not a seminar? Was that it's the Longmont Sally Part, or is that another one? I don't know. Anyway,
I don't think that was Longmont.
Yeah, it's at a different shelter. They just have a similar Sally Port.
Yeah.
All right. So generally speaking, we've kind of wound it down. Wow, I can't believe it. Lauren, how did that happen? I'm actually ahead of schedule. So we'll have.
Well, I mean, if we have 30 minutes of questions, then you're right on schedule. But I don't know that we'll have 30.
I don't know if we're gonna have that, but admittedly, to wrap it up, our style is that we do use all tools and techniques to support animals' rewardable behavior. We want to be as efficient and as effective as possible for them. We do not want to linger. We want to get them to all the good stuff as best as we can. So we use all of it. We always start with a positive foundation of the behaviors that we do want. We reinforce those like crazy. We'll ignore the stuff that we don't like as much as we can, unless it's a safety issue, and just try to focus on creating a lot more value in the stuff that we do want, right? That's not the dog's first choice in the beginning, but we try to make that stuff their first choice. We then are going to use pressure and release so that we have communication with the dogs, even if there's nothing that's positively reinforcing for them, because they're either too aroused, too frustrated, or too afraid, right? So we're going to go to pressure and release right away so that we can keep teaching them. We will use consequences and correction when they've got some stuff that is unsafe or really problematic for their adaptability or just generally their manners. We will go to corrections to say that is off the table. We will use positive punishment as the science prescribes. And then we will also focus a lot on teaching environmental cues in the shelter environment. We figure, man, isn't it pretty hot stuff when a dog just shows up at a door and automatically offers a sit and holds that sit politely until you release them? Boy, does that show well to adopters, right? So here's an example. This dog did come to us. He was transferred up from Denver Dumb Friends League. This is when we were at the Longmont Humane Society. He was on their euthanasia list because he was a jumpy, mouthy dog and was, bruising people's arms. He was becoming troublesome for them, kind of like that dog Pierce that you saw, the one that we added the squirt bottle in the kennel routine. So this guy was behaving like that, and he was a master door darter. He knocked me on my butt at least twice. And so this is one of our most dedicated volunteers working him. So we kind of worked out all these issues. And so this is him performing for his environmental cues for one of the volunteers.
Nice leash. Very nice. Go, go, go. Free. Nice.
Careful. Now, do I back out these doors? What? I don't back out these? No. Free. Beautiful.
Okay. We definitely, the mental stimulation that comes from training, I think that we so underestimate how valuable training is for those reasons. And not just because we're shoveling cookies at them all the time, but the impulse control that they learn from authentic training, the fact that they learn like, hey, I can sit here and observe and not be automatically acting upon everything, right? That's impulse control. And giving the dogs actual tasks that are rewardable. There's just so much value in that. We always say, especially at the Canine Care Center where we're doing we're working with the advanced training and behavior stuff. We talk amongst ourselves, even for us as people, the trainers and the people, as well as the animals. We go with the theory that we're going to do better so that we can feel better, instead of feeling like we can't expect anything from these dogs unless they're happy and content all the time. Let's teach them some skills so that we can build their confidence so that we can get to them being happy and content and we can be rewarding all these behaviors. So we're big believers in that. And we recognize that sometimes it takes more than just loving them, right? We got to teach them some stuff that's going to make them appealing to adopters. So if this stuff is interesting to you, I have a slide that talks about our mentorships and our shadow program. This video is from a while ago, but it's a video just about the shadow program, and we've got scholarships that you can sign up for. So I'll share this with you because it's fun.
I feel like I've gotten a lot out of it, really enhanced my skills, got my hands dirty right away.
Getting out of their kennels 4+ times a day, training, interacting with other dogs and people, it was a really good experience.
Being able to literally only train dogs for 8 hours a day is really helpful and has definitely improved my skills.
Not only is it beautiful, aesthetically, but it's set up for the dogs.
It's been a lot of consistent handling, being able to just work dogs all day long in a really wide space, peaceful environment. The emphasis is a lot more on really intensive training for these guys, and that's exactly what they need. Also, just enrichment time.
Everything is so that the dogs have the best possible opportunity for training and enrichment. Every time I put a dog back in their kennel, there would be some other form of enrichment that wasn't there when I took them out.
training,
Mhm.
and I learned a lot.
I think it's so funny at the end because the dog is pawing all over her. But so let me share with you guys. There's Lauren, where is the mentorship one? We now have them at the Canine Center. Both level 1 mentorship and the level 2 mentorship are at the Canine Center. And then what's our other location for the M1s? I forgot which one we were left with.
Well, we have something coming up at Kansas City Pet Project, but
That's the
we
last
also
one
do
for them, right?
at, I don't
Okay.
know. I never heard a
Okay,
definite.
we're not sure. They just
But
had a
we also
whole
do
change of regime, so we're not sure if they're going to continue doing it. And once they probably will, but they've got to get reorganized to do it again. And whom else?
Williamson County Animal Center in Franklin, Tennessee.
Tennessee, not Texas. That's the thing is that okay, so the Williamson County. And so they're near Nashville, correct? They're within that region?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so those are the locations in Florida, in Lake City, Florida, at the Canine Center, or at this near Nashville, Tennessee. We have the M1s, and I don't know if you already put the mentorship schedule in the chat. And then the shadow program that you saw that video is you just book your days whenever you've got availability and you just come train dogs with us. So you could do as few or as many as you'd like. We've had a couple of people have come for like a month at a time. And so we have information about that on the website. And then finally, here's how you can apply for a Will and Fund scholarship to participate in any of those programs. So I'll leave that up there for a minute. And do we have any questions? I saw that you answered one of them already in here.
We had a handful that I saved for you. And then if anybody else has questions, feel free to, looks like somebody maybe dropped that in the chat. That works. You can also put them in the Q&A. Either way, I will find them. So first question, somebody was asking about looking at some of the examples of the dogs at the Canine Center, wondering about their length of stay, and said I ask because for larger shelters, they might not have the time to do mark and reward training. And so he asked, what is the strategy to accommodate that?
So that's the thing that's really interesting about it. You know, that's what we hear all the time, even with play groups and any of this training is, well, we're understaffed. So the best way to put it is if you're just asking the dogs for a little bit more every time you take them out. So you might not be able to accomplish training an entire kennel routine, right? Because that does take time. You can at least be working on improving their behavior toward a full kennel routine, and it's still better than them just pell-mell coming out of the kennels, right? So we have a new program that we're running at the Canine Center called our Triple E Training Transports. And Triple E means every dog, every day, everywhere. And we are looking to have dogs, we're pulling dogs from shelters that are at risk because of overcrowding, or that they're decompensating in care because their length of stay is already pretty long. And they don't have prohibitive bite histories, because I'm sure you guys have all experienced the same thing that we have, is that it doesn't matter. Let's say if you have a dog that has a bite record and there's even a reasonable explanation for that bite, and then we've put the training into them, like the advanced cases that we've worked with, and we'll stand by the dogs. We're like, no, this dog is solid and it's good, and we would stand by them. It's really hard to get them placed regardless. So we recognize also from our work around the country that so many of you are fighting those longer length of stays. Our outcomes are disproportionately stagnant compared to what it was pre-pandemic. And so we're all struggling, especially with moving these larger dogs. So we're thinking we've got to get to a higher volume of that mid-range population instead of focusing on the end game dogs right now. Try to help you guys all with a higher volume of a lower level dog that is still becoming problematic in your shelter but doesn't have the bites. So some of the dogs that you saw at the Canine Center, they had a multitude of problems, so that they had very advanced training as a result of those problems. But this Triple E program, we're looking to turn dogs around between 2 to 3 weeks so that they are play groups, so that we know that they're solid in play groups. They've got good sociability, that they have loose leash walking, and they have trained kennel routines. And it might not be the full kennel routine that they will, for anybody showing up at the door, they'll automatically go to place, but at least once you get in the kennel, that they'll hold position and be mannerly while you leash them up and wait for permission to leave the kennel. And then we will also train them the door routines, that they will automatically sit when they approach a door or a gate, and they will hold that sit until they're released to go through. So we plan on turning dogs around like that in 2 to 3 weeks. And we were doing that before when I was not at the advanced, didn't have my own little fancy training center. When I used to be at the Southampton shelter, you saw examples of that. And at Longmont, we were doing all of this prophylactically for, except for the small dogs, right, Lauren? We didn't, small dogs come and go so fast. But if we had a problematic small dog, we put them through all the same paces and make them work just like a dog, right? Big dog. But 2 to 3 weeks we feel is pretty reasonable. Now, if you're working in I kind of didn't really exactly answer that question. If you're working in a really high volume shelter and you can barely even get your dogs out, my suggestion would be you focus and start teaching this to a couple of select dogs that are really struggling, and that even if they are getting walked, their behavior is problematic and you're starting to lose them, then I would target these efforts for those dogs, because it's the mental stimulation that they'll get from learning these things that could really be a make it or break it difference for them. Now I think I answered that question in a very long-winded way.
And then the second part of that question was any tips on getting kennel leadership to support mark and reward training when they're focused on other goals?
Well, kennel leadership typically, so okay, the best way to motivate people, and I literally had to practice what I'm preaching. I mean, we do have to do it all the time. I don't think a lot of times you can try to present some videos of something that you think is meaningful to them. Use our your handouts from our webinars to say, this is what we learned from DPFL. But bottom line, the best way to incentivize people to let you give something a try that's new, that they think, no, you don't have time, is just to pick a project dog, and show the demonstrable results of your effort and how well that dog is doing, and demonstrate, right, by action. Because I've learned, I went into shelters and I would be trying to explain to people why I'm going to do all the things I'm going to do, and they would just argue with me, and but this is the way we do it, and we don't have time, and all of those things over and over. And the best way to get people past that is like, okay, well, I'm going to do it and see how much better these dogs are behaving as a result of what I'm doing. And and then people get inspired to want to, hey, will you show me how you did that with that dog? And then you have people saying, show me.
Awesome. Next question. So this is about kennel routine and avoiding inadvertently teaching door darting. At this person's shelter, the kennel door latches are difficult to open from the inside. Suggestions for leashing and starting a kennel routine, avoiding door darting, but not getting locked in the kennel if you are indeed trying to go inside the kennel to start working with the dog. She said the shelter does not want to replace the door latches.
Understood. We were in that. It was so crazy because we did this huge upgrade of our kennels at Longmont. And it's funny, we never thought to tell them, and they never thought to ask us, that we wanted to go into the kennels to work the dogs. So there was no way to latch the kennel from the inside, to latch or unlatch it. It was only a throw latch from the outside. And all this money spent, and we're like, first time I went into the kennel to work the dog, it was like, oh my God. So what we ended up doing in that situation is if you have no ability to secure, let me ask a question of this person. Does the door close and latch at that point, or does it just free swing and you just don't have an ability to latch it or unlatch it from the inside?
Latches.
It latches. So is it like a knob handle? Do you have to stick your hand through and work a mechanism that way? Or you literally get locked in?
Tracy, feel free to also just pop up in the chat if that's easier. She said you get locked in.
You get locked in. Okay, so then what I would suggest is that you're doing a crack and slip, but you're not letting the dogs come out. You open the door and put your foot on the outside of the door, right? So you're blocking the space and your foot is kind of holding the door, and train a sit from there, that they have to hold that sit. So in the beginning, you would just be opening that door and taking that space. Make sure that you feel safe, that this isn't a dog that's going to redirect on you. That's a little bit of the hard part about this, because you're going to use yourself just to block that door. And when they stop trying to fight to get past you, you'll crack and slip at that point. And then eventually you're going to come in, maybe even lure them right into a sit, like do this, then crack and slip them. But you're going to hold that space so that, and then I would teach this outside of the kennel originally too, right? Go to a play yard or something, or practice it with a gate, that's not their actual kennel. If you're worried about them pushing past you and then fence fighting with all the other dogs, but you can teach them holding that sit in front of you and practicing a door opening and closing and practicing stepping away and getting them to hold that sit and then bringing that training into the kennel when they have a little bit of skill to them. Does that make sense?
I think. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Actually, you know what we could do? Lauren, if you don't mind,
yeah.
Afterwards, maybe just email the team, the CCF team, and see if they can film a video pretending that the door is going to latch and film a video of doing that thing so we can demonstrate how we would do that.
Okay.
It's a good idea.
Okay, next question. How do you help a shelter become open to tool usage, especially with something that has a stigma like pinch and e-collars?
Well, admittedly, what I'm going to tell you guys is when I first started going into shelters and wanted to work with those tools, I mean, honestly, this is just the truth. I was donated to the shelters by a donor, so I worked for a private party. So in all honesty, I don't want to, so there was a big fat checkbook behind me, right? So they wanted those donations. So I had some oomph when I would show up, in all fairness. But there's not always, not like I was always wielding that. It just was the nature of it. But the biggest thing is I would ask permission to just demonstrate. Again, pick a dog that you've tried all the other tools and that you feel like would respond really well. Start with the plastic pinch collar and ask permission to just work one dog on this equipment to show them that the equipment is not aversive to the dog. The other thing about, everybody likes the no pull harnesses. And the thing that drives me crazy is like we're working in shelters that are super high volume. It is not safe to get down and bend around a dog and necessarily to put a no pull harness on a dog that has no skills and has got a lot of built up frustration. You're putting yourself in a pretty vulnerable position. And some of them go on more easily than others, but there's real merit to just showing someone. And even if you, and the fact that you show the dog working better without you actively leash correcting them, that's what people think. Oh, if you're going to put a pinch collar on a dog, that means you're going to start jerking them all over the place. And when you're demonstrating, no, I'm not doing anything differently. I'm handling this dog exactly the same way that I'm handling this dog, but this tool is effective for this dog. He can respond to the handling now, as opposed to me being in this big wrestling match with him. So I always say, ask permission just to have one project dog and demonstrate your results.
She recommended starting with the plastic pinch. I put that link in the chat.
Thank you.
Certainly. Okay. Next, for a professional dog trainer that wants to help shelter dog populations, which in-person program would you recommend?
Oh, shadowing for sure. Yeah. Because then we can meet you where you are. So the other programs, the mentorships are like a structured curriculum. It's 4 days. And on day 1, we do this. On day 2, we do this. On day 3, we do this. On day 4, we do that. If you're already a professional trainer, I would just have you come in and shadow with us. So we don't have to waste time on stuff that maybe you're already, fully fluent in, or we can just meet you where you are and then help you progress from there. So it's less structured and it's more individually tailored.
I'm putting that overview in the chat. Okay, next. What do you like to do with a brand new dog that just arrived? Any protocols?
Yeah, you know what? I'm wondering if we have this much time on this one, if I get through it so much. Well, talk about equipment that shelters don't like. I'm big, we call it flexi find its. And so every single time I was meeting a dog for the first time, other than taking them to play group, I always had a flexi on me, and I would take the dogs out and on a 6-foot leash, because it's not safe to be on the flexi in the interior of the building. I would wait till I was away from the building and I had good visual access to everything around me. And I always put the dogs on flexis and let them get their yayas out and be moving away from me. And if they're trying to drag me at the end of 30 feet of flexi line, I would just do my loose leash walking, an exaggerated loose leash walk with them 20 feet away from me to start teaching them about how to turn off that pressure. And it also showed me how much natural pack drive they had. Did they want to be engaged with me? Were they so environmentally stimulated that I meant nothing to them? Again, it's allowing them to get their yayas out without being trapped and frustrated on a 6-foot leash with me. So it would make the dogs really start wanting to come find me and orient to me. And then eventually, even though they had access to 20 or 30 feet of line, they were just hanging out with me anyway. And so I find that a really positive way to get dogs to want to be with me instead of constantly trying to move faster and farther away from me. There's a fantastic trainer. I love him. His name is Jay Jack. And he's the one that gave me this analogy. And I think he knew the research behind it. And I don't know the numbers. That dogs, when they're naturally migrating together, which is a very natural behavior for dogs, is to migrate together in groups. They will tend to travel at a speed that is, they migrate faster than humans do, and they migrate at a farther distance than humans naturally do. So his analogy was making a dog, especially a dog with a lot of energy, walk on a 6-foot leash with us, especially when they've been pent up and frustrated in their kennel, is the equivalent of making human beings walk with their shoelaces tied together. I thought that was a great analogy. And so I love starting dogs with, if you're not allowed to use flexies, and if you're not good with a flexie, because you do have to learn how to work that tool properly without burning your hand by trying to grab the line, you've got to be good at locking it off when you're supposed to. And if you're fumbling with all of that, you can create a real hazard for the dog and for others around you. So you definitely have to practice with that. You can do it with a long line, but what bothers me about long lines is people tend to constantly want to wrap up long lines and then their hands get tangled up and that's a big mess. So you can do the same thing with a long line, but I would let the dogs get away from me and get their yayas out and start marking, rewarding them for checking in and start feeding in position and then start getting them interested in engaging with me.
When do you utilize slip leads?
I use slip lead. The only time I will ever use a slip lead, ever. If I could get slip leads out of here, I would. The reason that I don't like slip leads is because some of them have the stopper so that it can't continuously slip. And if that's the case, that's better. Then it's just a limited slip leash. That's kind of cool. But I only use slip leads when I have to because the dog is too sensitive and doesn't want me messing with collaring yet. That's the only time I use a slip lead, when they're not ready for that yet, until we can build some trust and rapport and teach them about collaring up. But as soon as I can get a collar on them, I move away from the slip lead immediately, especially thin nylon slip leads. I've seen plenty of dogs pass out because people are talking and hanging on to it, and the dog just passes out because you're literally taking there and strangling them. It also does deaden and toughen them in all of this area where you want them to be more sensitive. So I am not a supporter of slip leads unless you need to, because they don't want to be handled around their neck.
Before we get too far from the Flexi Find It discussion question, do you want the dog on a martingale or a flat collar for that exercise?
I always like martingales for safety with shelter dogs because I just don't want to risk them backing out of their collars. So I'm a huge fan of limited slip, 100%. Even the difference between a Halti and a gentle leader is that the Halti has a little bit of limited slip action because you can actually close their mouth, and so it can be a little bit more effective.
Okay, last question, at least right now. What percent of shelters seem to put this into effective practice? As a volunteer, I'm not sure how much this can be put into play for all staff and volunteers consistently.
That is true, and consistency is key to everything. So I understand why you feel that way, but I would start somewhere, because you've seen plenty of examples of shelters and adoption centers where a lot of people learned this and were effective, and not everybody did. So when we were at Longmont in Southampton, not all the volunteers would handle the dogs the way that we were prescribing. But you know what we also did is we rated those dogs. Like, this is an easy peasy dog. We don't really care how you handle this dog because the dog doesn't do anything wrong and isn't problematic for anyone. So just do whatever you want to do with those dogs. But the dogs that really needed some targeted intervention because we were starting to lose them, or they were not appealing to people when they tried to take them out because the dogs were just all over the place, then we structured their outings for those dogs and made sure that there was some consistency in the handling. And so I think, again, if you pick a dog or two and demonstrate, people will be inspired to follow your lead if you demonstrate results. What I've seen over and over again when I go to shelters is people are taught protocols that don't work and that aren't effective. And then people, they walk around the corner and they do whatever they want to do anyway. And some people are not going to like these techniques because they don't want to be bothered because they're not interested in training. And so those are not the people that should be handling your dogs that are maybe at risk and not getting out of there because they're ill-mannered, right? Let people that care about this stuff and that are willing to try and be consistent together, let them handle those dogs.
having some kind of tiered volunteer program so that
Yeah.
different skill levels are handling different dogs.
Staff too, to be honest with you. I had a consultation with the shelter that I said the same thing. I think your staff, it's funny, they have staff only dogs, but some of their animal care staff that loves to go and walk the dogs when they're finished with cleaning and feeding are terrible handlers and that are not maintaining the training that the training department is. So I'm like, your staff needs to be rated too. Not all of your staff should be able to handle all of the dogs. I don't care if it's their favorite. They're flubbing that one up, and all the good work that we're trying to do, they're unraveling it every time they take it out. So no.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's all.
We are right on time. Whoa.
Wow.
Has that ever happened?
I don't think so.
Okay, nobody ask any more questions. All right.
Thanks,
well,
everyone. So you'll get that follow-up stuff, the recording and the slides and everything tomorrow, about the time that we started today. Join us next week or tomorrow or both.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.